Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. India's gross domestic product will grow 6.8% in the year through March, according to the median of 16 estimates in a Bloomberg survey of economists. That's the slowest pace in 3 years and belies projections of a pickup to 7.7% made before Prime Minister Modi's November 8th decision to cancel 86% of currency in circulation. While analysts are still debating about how long the effects of the cash shortages will linger, a deep slowdown that kills jobs may turn voters against the BJP in key upcoming state elections. Indian stocks saw the biggest outflows in Asia last quarter, and global funds sold the most rupee debt in at least 5 years as the cash ban and higher US interest rates deterred investors. Even the President, Pranab Mukherjee, cautioned that the note ban may lead to temporary slowdown of the economy. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will discuss the impact of the expected slowdown of economy. Joining me on the program today are SK Jindal, Chairman, ASSOCHAM Investment and Capital Markets; Nitin Desai, former Economic Chief Advisor, Government of India; Praveen, Professor, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, JNU; and AK Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program. Mr. Bhattacharya, I'd like to start with you, of course, and ask you, the President himself has warned of an economic slowdown post-demonetization. How do we brace for the situation that has already happened and is to come?
Well, if we assume economic slowdown, which is most likely, we can debate over the pace of the slowdown that might take effect because of demonetization. I think the first big step that the government must take to face up to the challenge of demonetization-led slowdown would be quick remonetization. I think that should be the first step. Unless you remonetize the economy, you will not be able to tackle the adverse impact of demonetization, which is mainly demand destruction. So that is point number one. And the point number two, because we will see a budget that is going to be presented in less than 4 weeks from now, it's time that the budget prepared to meet the requirements of the economy that is now, which is, in my view, should first be focused largely on an investment stimulus, and number two, it should also be able to create incentives in the system, and that those incentives could probably come by way of a rationalized and a reduced tax structure, so that the economic entities are encouraged to produce more and engage in a more rapid pace of economic activity. So I would look at it in 3 phases. One, demonetization as fast as possible. Second, create an investment stimulus for the economy through the budget. And 3, tax rationalization and tax reduction, so that economic entities can actually feel more encouraged to produce more and engage in I would call, a rebuilding of India's economy.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Jindal, the biggest problem thus far after demonetization was liquidity. And we saw that the Prime Minister himself said, give me 50 days. To the Prime Minister's credit, of course, we saw things slowly limping back to normalcy after that 50-day period. But has too much damage already been done?
This damage, what has already happened, was already estimated when the process was started. It is not something that it was not imagined, or it was not taken into account. So we don't see anything alarming which has happened and we could not have imagined before. Now we are seeing that things are coming back to normal in reasonably good speed, and we have no apprehension that things will go beyond control. This temporary pain was bound to be there for such a big step which will change our future. Change our future, I mean to say that our future, as I look at, economy will be much more efficient. Few steps, including that cashless or less cash utilization and other things, what has happened as a result of demonetization, they will all add to the efficiency of our economic system. Taxation, for example, we expect that in the coming budget also, and in further down from there, we will see lower and more efficient taxation. So that will again help us. All these things will add to the efficiency of the economy, and we feel that this change could not have happened without pain. This much pain what we have seen.
Indeed. Okay. the pain was well worth it, is what Mr. Jindal is saying. Professor Jha, would you agree with that assessment? Do you think that the benefits that we reap out of this whole exercise, this disruptive exercise, is going to be far more than what we have lost?
With due respect to Mr. Jindal, my views on the matter are very different. As regards the potential gains, possible gains, which might happen at some point, I am very, very skeptical. Of course, there will be greater formalization by definition, the way things are happening, etc. But does it really lead to an increase in efficiency? What does resource use efficiency mean, right? Or, as Mr. Bhattacharya pointed out, that this might result in lower taxation, and that actually might improve investments. We know that even now, it's the public investment which actually crowds in the private investment. And there's been a lot of concern regarding the inadequacy of private investment for quite some time. Now, if we have a reduction in taxes, which means lower resource mobilization for the government, should that happen, that would impact public investment adversely. What implications does it have? Now, these are unknowns. I do not have very clear answers as regards how these will play out, because economy is a very complex thing,
yes,
as you know. So, was the pain required at all? I would argue it was completely unnecessary, because what was the initial objective? To try and attack the black economy. Now, on this, I think today there is unanimity, if not unanimity, certainly widely held consensus that it was, to use the language that Supreme Court also endorsed, it was a kind of carpet bombing to kill something which was possibly a very, very small target in the respect of what you were trying to do. But we know that very small part of black wealth or black income is held in cash, and for that, if 85%, if to try and sort of impact on 5%, if we have massive adverse outcomes for 80–90% of the population, clearly there is something wrong. And on this, I think most economists have come out openly and have said that this probably was, quite unnecessary. We have had a whole range of views there, but on the whole, I think the widely shared view is that this was. So, I would argue that even this pain was completely unnecessary. If we are interested in tackling black economy, then we have to think of a whole range of very different mechanisms and ways. And subsequently, the goalpost shifted. It said, no, it's not only just black economy, we are really talking of digitization and less cash or cashless. Again, that you cannot achieve overnight or in 1 year or 2 years. You really have to think in terms of the necessary infrastructure. Do we have that infrastructure? We need to think in terms of social infrastructure to enable that. Do we have that in place? Can we do that overnight or in 6 months or 1 year? Right? In any case, what seems to be the outcome of it is essentially benefiting a handful of players which are in the world of finance. So, every transaction which is done in a digital fashion, we know that somebody is benefiting out of it.
Indeed.
Right? So, if you take all these into account, my sense is that this was an extremely ill-conceived move, and what we know in terms of the impact on the economy, again, there are different estimates. You already quoted survey by Bloomberg, 16, whatever, but you also have estimates which say that in the second quarter, the second half of the financial year, growth would come to as low as 0.5%. In the quarter in which this demonetization has been done, it would be negative, right? So, again, I mean, whose estimates should we go by?
Indeed.
So there are all kinds of issues that we need to.
But there are a few figures that we can look at, the November, December figures. For instance, the manufacturing output is down. Mr. Desai, also, there's a decline in bank credit, and also there's a decline in consumption demand. And if the two-wheeler sales are something to go by, Hero MotoCorp reported a drop in 34% for the month of December. So there are a few figures out there to suggest that the economy hasn't done very well in November and December and might not do well in the next quarter as well.
I think, can I just comment on the two things? One, the impact of demonetization in the longer run. My one big fear is if it has endangered perhaps the most important reform that we had in the works, which was GST. We know it's not going to come in April, but GST would have been a real big is a big thing. Even if you want a cashless economy, it would have been a far greater pressure for that, because if I want to claim a refund, I will have to load my transactions to claim a refund. And you cannot do that unless you go electronic, unless you go through banking channels. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to work this. So I hope that's not been endangered. In terms of impact, I would say the two sectors which have been most severely impacted, one is the sectors where, for a lot of very bad reasons, cash transactions were very common. A typical example being land and property. The second is probably what, from the stories that we have seen in the newspapers, the big clusters of small and medium, micro and small industries, like Rajkot, Jalandhar, Aligarh, Moradabad, etc., where the stories, at least in the newspapers, of the shutdown of units, loss of employment, are really very alarming. These are the two sectors which were probably more cash dependent than others, and where the shortage of liquid cash has had an impact. It is possible that with remonetization, the recovery there may well come in, the chains may build up. There, I think the key that I would look to the finance minister for is consumer confidence. Part of the problem today is that consumers are scared of buying, because you don't know what your cash situation is going to be tomorrow.
There's no demand.
So how do I rebuild the sense of confidence in the minds of the consumers? And this has added to the investment famine that we've had. We've been running, our rate of investment in our economy has been steadily declining. And whatever the view that Mr. Jindal made, the fact is there is nobody who accepts that there is any sort of investment optimism in the private sector. There is virtually no investment optimism in the private sector, and that had to be revived. And now, if on top of that you have consumers withdrawing from the market, you are creating a very difficult situation. So my plea to the finance minister would be, rebuild consumer confidence. Please go ahead and make sure you get GST done, if not by April, at least by June or July. Make the concessions which may be necessary in order to get it going, because that's
will it ever happen in June or July, or will it ever happen also, is another big question at this moment.
No, it has to happen. It will happen, because for the simple reason that in September, the authority to levy any sort of indirect tax goes.
Sure.
So they will have to find an answer.
Indeed.
It's an absolute necessity.
Indeed. So Mr. Jindal, do we see any kind of a roadmap in the finance minister's budget to sort of clarify and to sort out several of those demons that are present in the minds of several of the economists in this country?
Of course, this is the main event now in front of us when he announced the budget, and we will get to know the full sense of what government is up to, because by that time they will have all the figures also, results of demonetization also, and then they have to plan for the next budget.
So what can we expect?
Lower taxes, because there are a lot of taxes, lower taxes because collections are more, and as my friend said, that if you lower the taxes, the collection will be less, but I tend to differ there. Whenever taxes have been lowered, the collection has been more. So more rationalization means more collection of tax. It has never happened when you have reduced the taxes, the collections have gone less. So lower taxes, simplification, GST, as Mr. Desai said, I am also hopeful that by September something will definitely come, but if it comes earlier, it will be a benefit. And whatever they have done to economy to re-establish it, I think they will do everything what is possible in the budget so that confidence comes back. This pain could not have been avoided.
Is the confidence low? Do you believe that the confidence is low at the moment?
Temporarily, yes. Okay. Temporarily, yes. For 1 quarter more, yes. But after that, I don't see it.
Okay, indeed. I know, Professor Jai, you want to come in, but I want to get in Mr. Bhattacharya also into the picture right now, because Mr. Bhattacharya, like the finance minister said, and several, even the RBI said that the lending rates will come down eventually as a result of demonetization, and we saw that happening. Several lenders have reduced their lending rates, but the problem really is that there are no takers for these loans, and that really needs to be addressed as soon as possible.
Well, this is probably the problematic part on what the Prime Minister announced on 31st of December, because, we are not really geared to a system where the government decides what should be the lending rate. it should be left to the banking sector and the banks in particular to decide on what the lending rate ought to be. So I think what we did witness post demonetization is some sort of a state coming back into the picture and deciding for the nation, for the country, for the lenders and the consumers that what should be the bank's lending rate. I think this is an unfortunate development, and sooner we go back to a system where the RBI and the banks, they decide in terms of what should be the lending and the deposit rates. So I think that's not the right direction for this economy to take.
So is the RBI no longer independent then?
No, I am not saying RBI is not independent. What I am saying is this, that for the government to give directions to the banks that the lending rate should be brought down is not a happy situation to be in, particularly at a time when your banking sector is no longer predominantly ruled by the public sector banks. You have got a large number of private sector banks who have come into play. Therefore, probably government should rather stay away from deciding on what should be the lending rate or the deposit rates. As it is, the government is moving away from these kind of rate structures, and it is not a very happy situation to be in. Just one point which on GST, what Dr. Desai talked about, I want to say that one positive indication the finance minister in his budget can give is probably keep the indirect taxes rate apart from customs unchanged, so that there is a clear roadmap for the GST rates to kick in as soon as possible. Now, if he gets into the exercise of tweaking the indirect tax rates, particularly excise and other assesses, then probably it will be a wrong signal to the market that he is not going to bring in the GST sooner than later. So I think a good signal for the finance minister on 1st of February would be to keep his excise rates completely unchanged and say that we will keep these rates unchanged till GST kicks in. That itself will act as some sort of a pressure on the system to bring in GST as soon as possible.
Sure, fair enough. Yes, Mr. Desai.
Let me just say a little more explicitly. I think one institution which has come out of this whole exercise with its reputation badly sullied is the Reserve Bank of India. One of the whole trend over the past 2 decades since Rangarajan came there as governor has been to enhance its autonomy. And we just had the Monetary Policy Committee set up a little earlier, when it was supposed to be the real hallmark of an independent central bank. But what has been done during the demonetization, the manner in which the Reserve Bank board was made to approve it just hours before the announcement, I think it has sullied the reputation of this very important institution. I just wanted to register my concern at this, and I hope that this is allowed to be restored in time, because it's very, very important that we have an independent central.
It is extremely important, and we hope that that happens sooner rather than later. But yes, Professor Jha, you wanted to make a couple of points.
I mean, let me first of all very strongly endorse what Dr. Desai said just now about the RBI. On the couple of issues which were being discussed earlier, for instance, if you look at loan advances for this quarter, as per the official estimates that we have, it is lowest in 2 decades. If you just compare last year and this year, it has come down from close to 7% to about just above 1% or so. It's a massive crash that we are talking about. If you look at the number of projects and compare the 2 quarters, the before demonetization and after demonetization, it has come down on a daily basis by half, right? Now, these are very powerful indicators. Apart from the other numbers that you were talking about, I think if we take all these into account, we are essentially witnessing an economic mayhem, right? I mean, it's nothing short of that.
Those are very strong words that you're using.
Yes, indeed. And especially, apart from the sectors that Dr. Desai talked about, look at agriculture, look at workers in general, those who are in the informal sector and so on. If you read newspaper accounts, and again, I am going only by newspaper accounts, it seems to be an extremely disastrous kind of story. Finally, on the tax GDP ratio, you know it very well. India has one of the lowest tax GDP ratios among the comparable countries.
In the present scenario, Professor Jha, don't you see any silver lining at all?
You see, as I said, some formalization, but that again, one should not kind of have this misleading view that formalization is necessarily better for either economic well-being of people or GDP growth rates and so on. These are indeed very complex things. And, this formalization ideally over a reasonably long period, I would say is a step in the right direction. But forcing it down over a short period of time is, to my mind, completely wrong. It's utterly despotic. It's something which does not really serve the purpose either intended by those who probably have good intentions, right? Apart from, as I said, and that's why I was questioning, whether this pain was worth it at all in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. I think Mr. Jindal will want to respond to some of the things that you said, especially about economic mayhem and calling it a despotic measure. Mr. Jindal, do you want to respond to?
No,
I was quoting Professor Amartya Sen incidentally on despotic.
My response is very simple. I don't connect with this. I would beg to differ totally, and I see a good future in front of us, because whatever these steps have been taken, nothing is something wrong, or as Professor.
How long do we wait for this good future?
1 quarter to things to become normal.
Okay.
Which will happen because of the remonetization, which is necessary, of course, for system to be liquid and fluid. So that 1 quarter pain I see is still left.
So from April onwards, you believe that everything will go back to normal, and we'll see that the growth rate in fact improving and going beyond what it has been.
Yes, I do it.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Desai?
Judging by what we have read about the disruption of small industry, also I'm not entirely convinced it's just 1 quarter. Second, the cash dependent sectors need more than just remonetization. We need a completely different way of handling land transactions and property transactions. Just getting rid of the small amount of black money will not solve the problem. It needs much more deep-rooted reforms. And where are they in sight? And not only that, these are reforms which will have to be undertaken by state governments and not just by the center. So, and without that, it's going to come back, the cash economy. The other area which I must register my preference is that one of the key reasons why we've had a black economy in this country is the way our politics is run. Why is it that so far we have not had an announcement from any political party that they will not take money except by check? If they are serious about this, that's where I would start. Because that's what the source is, even land transactions. Let's be realistic. Much of what we see in the corruption in land transactions is linked to political fundraising. So I would argue that much more needs to be done to address the root causes of the problem. Otherwise, you're simply going to see the cash economy coming right back with the new notes instead of the old notes.
It already has.
Well, it has probably already started, but
yes,
it is possible. I think, let me put it this way, in favor of the war, which would probably some people would consider support. It's a bit like mortar fire in a war. That you are, he called it carpet bombing, I call it mortar fire. But it's not enough in a war also. You have to follow up mortar fire which softens up the enemy line
to the government's defense, they have said that there are going to be several more measures in the future to try and ensure that they build up on what has already been done. I think we can wait and see what those measures are.
But let me say frank, it's not just measures of a danda type. You see, when I look at land transactions, it's not just Benami property issues. It's the fact that we have a completely inefficient land market in this country.
Sure.
That we have to address.
Your point's very well taken. I've got about 3 minutes left on the program, so I'd like to get final quick closing comments from all my guests, starting with you, Mr. Bhattacharya. Mr. Desai listed out a couple of sectors that, need immediate attention. But according to you, what do you believe are some of the sectors that need immediate impetus from the government, need that carrying forward or that push in the near future?
I personally feel that the banking sector is still in a complete mess. Their ability to offer loans is severely constrained because of their own NPA situation, which hasn't got better at all. So therefore, the government should perhaps get back to its old agenda outlined in Indradhanush, and we actually have stopped hearing anything more on Indradhanush. And I think it's very important to, at least the budget should address the banking sector problem in a more comprehensive way. That is one area. And the second area, to my mind, would be that because the Indian industry is continuing to operate at a capacity utilization level of around 74–75%, therefore, to expect the private sector to come and invest and bail the economy out would be would be stupid and foolish. So therefore, it is better the government to step in and fill that gap. And this is an opportunity. This is the budget. And if that means either a pause or a limited relaxation in the fiscal consolidation roadmap in the current situation, where the tax collection this year would be fairly healthy going by the till December 19th trend, probably this is an opportunity to even experiment with limited slippage in fiscal consolidation plan, aided by the encasing committee's report perhaps, and then provide more money into the system through capex so that some economic activities can be regenerated.
Indeed, the onus is on the government, and the government should be the driving force. Professor Jai, your quick final closing comments.
You see, this point about MSMEs was brought into the discussion by Dr. Desai, and we know that 99% of our enterprises, if you take manufacturing and services altogether, are MSMEs. Now, what do we do about them? I think that is, if you're thinking of way ahead and road ahead, etc., how do we pay attention to that? And let me connect with what Mr. Bhattacharya said about the government taking the lead. Now, for that, you really need resources. And I am very skeptical about some of the figures which were given, right, as regards tax collections and so on. Let us see what the final figures are. I am quite certain that if you take the financial year as a whole, there is no way that in terms of collections through appropriate channels, let's forget about cesses. Some of the changes are precisely because we had these additional cesses. Some of it is because of voluntary disclosure and so on and so forth. So you got some money, but these are one-off kind of things.
Yes.
Right. But if you're really looking at healthy tax buoyancy kind of story there, I think we have messed up more than we have gained.
Indeed. All right, Mr. Jindal, your final quick closing comments.
I would like more reforms to address employment through MSME sector by incentivizing through reforms. That is one part. Second is public investments, because now they have collected a lot of taxes, they will have money in hand. So they should be able to spend more on investments so that economy can get back into gear.
Indeed. All right. All right. And Mr. Desai, please close the show for us with your closing comments.
Well, I'd say first, I would tell the finance minister be realistic about 17-18. If they start working on the basis of the numbers which will come out today, remember, they are based on data up to October.
Yes.
They do not really include the data after the demonetization. If he works on this data, then come June, July, when the revised estimates are out, he will have to rework all his deficit and tax calculation. So be realistic, be sober, listen to your economic advisors, and don't go overboard just on the basis of numbers which will come out today. Second, I think the number of farms and small enterprises employing 5 or less workers in this country is 20 crore. They are the people who have been badly hit. They are very cash dependent. Do something for them. Bring them back into the supply chain. I would say this is what I would look to. And of course, there are many other things which have been said, which I would endorse.
On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. S.K. Jindal, Nitin Desai, Praveen Jha and A.K. Bhattacharya. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on this edition of The Big Picture and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching.